Okay, let's look at this program again, but now let's look at it from the perspective of doing an update. So the first thing the user is doing is just searching through the rows or performing a query. Now when we have a row that we want to update, we can choose the update option and notice that our store number field is disabled. Now I've changed the code slightly so that in the form the store number has a no entry constraint on it, and this allows you to disable, or it will automatically disable, the field during an input. So we were able to get rid of the before field code and simply specify a no entry on the store number field. But notice that on a construct, it does still allow you to search by that particular field. Okay, so if we choose update, we'll notice that we automatically are pushed into the store name field. We can make our changes. If there are any other control blocks that are set up, for instance, when we tabbed out of city, the address to verbiage was placed in here. Those control blocks will also trigger based on the code. And when we confirm our edits, we get the row updated message here. So let's take a look at how that code works. The first thing we want to look at here is on action update. So the user has performed a query, has a result set, and now we want to update. So on action update, notice that we're calling the same function that we called for the add, but this time we're passing in a U flag. This is going to allow us to traverse through that input block, knowing whether or not we're doing an update or an add, or the user is doing an update or an add. So let's take a look at that code. So here's our input update cust function. We've passed in a U. And as you can see, again, we are initializing the work cust rec to null. And if it's not an A, then we're going to instead specify update customer, and we're going to let the work cust rec equal the master cust rec. So again, we're going to be changing what's in the work record to be a copy of the master record. So we're making a copy of what the user is looking at, what row they want to work with, before we let them make any changes. That way we have a copy of it that we can restore back if needed. So the next thing, we're setting int flag to false, so we'll be able to trap if they do cancel out or anything during the time they're in the input. Then we go into the input, and here in the input by name, we simply are having the same control blocks, but some of course are checking if it's an add or an update. Here the store name, after field store name, if it's null, we are going to force them back into that. So again, during an update, we're not going to let them to clear out the store name and not provide one there. And then in our after field city, this particular code was setting some address to verbiage after leaving that city field, and we saw that happen as well. Now, once we've exited the input, we're returning back to the program, and the next thing that happens is the update cust function is called. So the update cust function is going to actually update the record in the database, the row in the database, with the new values. So here we can see the update cust function sets a record just like the customer columns in the customer table, and sets up a transaction for selecting the row that we want to update and then making those changes based on what is in our currently in the master record. So let's close this so we have a little bit more room to work with. So here we're going to do a select, but not a standard select. Instead, we're going to do a select for update, meaning that we're going to select a particular row with the purpose of updating it. So we're going to be setting a lock on that row so that no one else can change the row while we're in the process of updating it. So we're selecting our record where the store num is the same one that's in our master record, and then we're going to do a check here to make sure that that record still exists. If it doesn't exist any longer, we're just going to give a message back to the user saying the store has been deleted. So we're using this SQLCA SQL code built-in record or variable here to check to see that the row still exists. So if the row still exists, then we're going to let our local record that we just defined equal the work record. So the work record is the one that they made changes to, potentially. And if those are the same, we're going to let matches equal true. If matches is true, there is a match between the one that we have that they've been editing and the copy that we made, then we're going to go ahead and do the update. So update the customer table, setting each of these columns that are in the master record to the column in the database, and where the store num is the same as the primary key store num that we have in the row that we're looking at. And if SQLCA SQL code equals 0, then we're going to tell them the row is updated. So 0 is success. If that's not the case, then we're going to let the master record equal the local record. So we're going to replace the master record, their changes that are in the master record currently, with the local record. So the current or most recent updated values, and display that to the user so that they can see that the row was actually updated by another user and their update did not take effect. Then we're going to commit. If everything is okay, if our continue okay is true, we're going to commit the work. If it wasn't true, we're going to roll back the work. In other words, the transaction is not going to be successful and is not going to be executed unless all these parts are executed. So we're just using the continue okay variable to pass through each of the stages of this to determine if we should commit the changes or roll back to where we began, which was at the begin work. Up here prior to the select. And that's how the update works in this particular program.